If you go to Brunei today, you can pay with Singapore dollar almost everywhere. One Singapore dollar equals to one Brunei dollar. This is because something called Currency Interchangeability Agreement or CIA signed in 1967. It basically says the currency of Singapore, Malaysia and Brunei will all be accepted at par value. $1 in one country was worth exactly the same as $1 in other countries. At the time, these three countries were just separated from a shared currency called the Malaysian and British Borneo dollar. The economies were still deeply connected to trade, travel and investment. The agreement keeps stability in the region so people and businesses did not have to worry about the exchange rates. But in 1973, Malaysia decided to quit. Singapore and Brunei carried on, but Malaysia went its own way. That single decision created two very different currency paths. So why did Malaysia leave? First, the world economy was changing very fast. In 1971, the Bretton Woods system collapsed. Before that, the US dollar was tied to the gold, and most other currencies were tied to the dollar. But after the collapse, exchange rates began to float. Suddenly, countries needed more freedom to manage their own currency. Malaysian economy was very different from Singapore or Brunei. Malaysia depended heavily on commodities like rubber and tin. Prices of these products went up and down a lot, which made Malaysian economy unstable. To deal with this, Malaysia wanted a flexibility to adjust its currency, and sometimes weaker to help the exporters and sometimes stronger to control inflation. Singapore, on the other hand, was moving towards becoming a financial and investment hub. For that, you needed a stable and strong currency to build trust with investors. Brunei has oil, and sticking with Singapore system worked perfectly for them. Second, Malaysia also wanted more sovereignty. Do not forget, Singapore has only separated from Malaysia in 1965, just 2 years before the CIA was signed. There were still political sensitivities around. For Malaysia, having its own independent currency and policy was a way of showing national identity and economic control. Third, there was global inflation and US dollar crisis in the early 1970s. Malaysian government worried that if it stayed tied to Singapore's stricter system, it would lose flexibility to respond. So in May 1973, Malaysia quit the CIA with Singapore, and 2 weeks later, it pulled out from Brunei as well. Now, what happened after Malaysia left? For Singapore, Singapore created MAS called Monetary Authority of Singapore in 1971. MAS did a very good job and did something very unique. Instead of using interest rate like most central banks do, Singapore used exchange rate itself as a main tool of monetary policies. MAS managed the Singapore dollar against a basket of foreign currencies. The goal was to keep Singapore dollar strong enough to fight inflation, but not too strong that exports become too expensive. This policy works extremely well. Inflation stayed low, reserves grew huge, and investor confidence soared. Singapore built up trust that Singapore dollar would always be stable. That's why even during global crisis, the Singapore dollar remains rigid and solid. For Malaysia, Malaysia chose flexibility. The central bank, Bank Negara Malaysia, often intervened to support local industries and economic growth. The ringgit was first linked to British pound, then later to US dollar. After 1973, it floated more freely, but with heavy government influence. Malaysian policy were also shaped by domestic politics. The government often used subsidies, credit support, and sometimes easy money to boost growth. This helped industry and workers in the short term, but it also created more inflation compared to Singapore. The big turning point came in Asian financial crisis in 1997. When Thailand power collapsed, panic spread across Asia, investors pulled money out of risky markets, and Malaysia was hit hard. The ringgit dropped sharply and capital fled the country. Malaysia responded by doing something bold and controversial at the same time. It pegged the ringgit at 3.8 to the US dollar and imposed capital control, meaning money would not freely leave the country. Many Western investors criticized this move, but it gave Malaysia stability to recover. By contrast, Singapore did not need capital controls because investor trust in Singapore dollars was already very strong. The MAS continued to manage the currency through exchange rate system, and Singapore weathered the storm better. After the crisis, Malaysia eventually let ringgit float again in the year 2005, but by then the gap between the ringgit and Singapore dollar had widened. In 1973, 1 Malaysian dollar was roughly equal to 1 Singapore dollar. Today, 1 Singapore dollar equals to more than 3 ringgit Malaysia. So why did this gap appear? Because Singapore kept a very disciplined monetary system, while Malaysia used its currency as a tool for domestic growth and political needs sometimes. One strategy built long-term global trust, the other gave flexibility, but came at the cost of currency values. What if Malaysia have never created this currency agreement or currency interchangeability agreement (CIA)? If Malaysia had stayed, then in theory, 1 ringgit could still be equal to 1 Sing dollar. You could spend Malaysian ringgit in Singapore and Brunei just like their own currency. Life could be very different for cross-border workers, businesses, and travelers. Malaysia will have the same strict monetary policies like Singapore. No currency pegs during 1997 crisis, no large subsidies funded by monetary easing, no weakening of ringgits to help exporters. Politically, that could be very tough for Malaysia. On the other hand, the ringgit could be much stronger today. Malaysia could enjoy higher purchasing power, imported goods could be cheaper, and the economy might be like Singapore, smaller but more values or globally competitive. So when you look at exchange rate for today, seeing one Sing dollar worth more than 3 ringgit, you really see the result of one decision in 1973 combined with the decades of very different economic choices and the government management. Currency policy isn't about just money, it's about sovereignty, politics, and long-term vision of a country. Singapore bet on disciplines and global confidence. Malaysia bet on flexibility and domestic priorities. Both had their own reasons and both shaped the very different economies as what we see today. So thanks for watching, and if you like the content like this, please don't forget to follow Jason Kang for more content like this, and see you in the coming videos. Bye, and don't forget to leave your comments.